still half asleep. He didn't shout. He didn't even sound angry. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "You should apologize to Dad," he said. I thought I'd misheard. Apologize? Yeah, for taking his place. The air shifted. Even the clock seemed to pause. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the grin, the quick backtrack. But it never came. His eyes were clear, unwavering. The same eyes that once searched for me at the end of every school day, now looking through me like I was furniture in a house he'd already left. "Tyler," I said quietly, "I didn't take anyone's place. Your father left." He shrugged. "He had his reasons. You just filled in." Filled in. Two words that landed like stones in the gut. There's a kind of silence that follows certain truths, not loud, not explosive, but terminal. It feels like the moment right after a car crash, when your body hasn't yet realized the damage. I felt that silence settle between us. I looked at him and saw not the boy I'd raised, but a stranger wearing his face. The same lips I'd wiped blood from after a scraped knee, now shaping a sentence meant to erase me. "Is that what you believe?" I asked. "It's what Mom says sometimes," he answered, eyes drifting toward the window. "That you tried too hard. That you wanted to be someone you're not." The words slid out of him like confession. Not cruel, just indifferent. That was worse. Anger I could have fought. Indifference was final. I thought about the nights I'd spent fixing his bike chain under the porch light. The winter mornings I'd driven him to hockey practice before dawn. The graduation fees already paid, the college savings account I'd built in his name. Every memory flashed through me not as pride, but as inventory, receipts for a life suddenly deemed counterfeit. I wanted to shout, to tell him what it meant to stay when another man ran, to explain that love isn't a title, it's work. But what's the point of arguing with someone who has already rewritten the story? He stood there waiting for me to respond, his face unreadable, the faint outline of Rick in his jawline and stance. I realized then that I wasn't talking to my stepson anymore. I was talking to his father's ghost, a ghost that had finally come home through him. "Does he know you said that?" I asked. He frowned. "Who?" "Your dad. The one who calls once a year. The one you're asking me to apologize to." He didn't answer. He just shifted his weight and said, "You'll never understand. He's still my dad. Still my dad." The kind of loyalty that burns through logic. I nodded slowly. "I see." And I did see. Everything, finally, with brutal clarity. I saw 8 years of labor repaid with one sentence. I saw Laura's quiet complicity in the background of every dismissal, every mockery disguised as a joke. I saw the truth that had been whispering all along. I had been building a home on rented ground. He turned to leave and I almost reached for him, but my hand stopped midair. You can't hold on to someone who's already left in spirit. When the door shut behind him, the house felt larger. The kind of emptiness that hums. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd once done homework together. His old math book was still on the shelf, marked with pencil smudges, a relic of a time when he still listened. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared at the steam twisting upward like smoke from something already burned. That morning, I realized how easily devotion can be mistaken for intrusion. How quickly a man's effort can be rewritten as overreach. Laura came downstairs an hour later, still in her robe. She saw my face and hesitated. "What happened?" "Your son," I said. "He thinks I owe his father an apology." Her eyes flickered, surprise first, then something else. Not shock, not outrage. Something quieter. Resignation. "Oh," she said softly. "He's just confused. He's been talking to Rick lately." I laughed once, short, sharp. "That explains it." She moved toward the counter, busying herself with the coffee pot. "Don't let it get to you. He's 18. They say things." I watched her hands shake slightly as she poured her cup. "And what do you say, Laura?" She didn't look at me. "I say you've done enough. More than enough." That was all. More than enough. A phrase meant to comfort, but it landed like a verdict. I thought about all the years I'd carried this family like a body across a frozen lake, careful not to crack the surface. I had believed that loyalty could substitute for blood, that constancy could replace history. I had believed, foolishly, that love was earned through effort. But that morning, that single exchange at the doorway, undid everything. It wasn't just rejection. It was revelation. I realized that for some people, blood is the only proof of worth. That no matter how much you give, no matter how long you stay, you remain an outsider waiting for permission to belong. When Laura left for work, the house fell silent again. The refrigerator hummed, the light shifted across the kitchen floor, and the smell of coffee grew stale. I sat there for a long time, thinking about the years I'd spent trying to build something real out of other people's fragments. I thought of Tyler's face, calm, unflinching, as he told me I was an intruder. The cruelty wasn't in his words, but in the ease with which he spoke them. That's when I understood. The collapse of illusions doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like breath, quiet, steady, final. By evening, the sun had gone down, and the house was wrapped in that kind of stillness that feels like judgment. I walked past the photos on the wall. Tyler in his hockey uniform, Tyler at 12 holding a fishing pole, Tyler on his first day of high school. My shadow crossed each frame, dimming his smile. I turned off the lights one by one until only the kitchen lamp remained. I sat down again, pen in hand, and began to write out every expense, every line item, every trace of what I had poured into that boy's life. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity, proof that I had been there, that I had existed in more than memory. When I finished, I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into the drawer. It wasn't a bill. It was a eulogy. The next morning I woke early. The air felt lighter. The world outside was the same. Gray sky, frost on the car windows, but something inside me had changed shape. A quiet resolve, cold and necessary. I didn't plan revenge or confrontation. I simply decided that the part of me that begged for belonging had died. Because sometimes the hardest truth a man can face is not that he failed to be loved, but that he succeeded, and it still wasn't enough. I first met Laura not in Memphis, but in Colorado Springs, a tired corner of the city where wind always seemed to drag dust across the parking lots. She was working double shifts at a pizzeria, the kind with yellowed menus and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. I was delivering supplies for a construction site nearby, and every Thursday, I'd stop in for a late dinner. She'd be there behind the counter, hair tied back, flour dusting her sleeves like ash. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, but it was still the most honest thing in that place. Back then, Rick was somewhere in Nevada, chasing schemes with men who called themselves entrepreneurs and lived like ghosts. Laura told me he'd send money when things picked up. They never did. She showed me the last message he'd sent. Sorry, things got complicated. I'll fix it soon. He never did. When I met Tyler for the first time, he was a quiet boy with eyes that didn't trust the world. 10 years old, polite but watchful. He looked at me like a man looks at an unfinished bridge. Maybe it'll hold, maybe it won't. I didn't try to force anything. I helped with his homework when Laura was too tired, drove him to soccer practice, waited in the car when he didn't want me on the bleachers. Small steps. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I just wanted to stop the bleeding. In those early months, I told myself that love was patience, that consistency would rewrite memory. I believed that if I stayed long enough, the past would fade like smoke. I thought loyalty could erase absence, and maybe it did for a while. Laura had a way of making exhaustion look graceful. She'd collapse on the couch at night, eyes half open, whispering, "You're too good to us." I'd laugh and say, "Just paying my rent in gratitude." But beneath the laughter, I believed her. I believed that goodness could anchor people, that if I gave enough, she and Tyler would never drift. I was wrong. There's a kind of faith men carry when they think endurance is virtue. We tell ourselves that staying through silence, through insult, through distance is proof of love. I carried that faith like a relic. It made me strong, but it also made me blind. The first time I realized how deep Rick's shadow ran was at Tyler's 11th birthday. I'd saved for months to buy him a new bike. Bright red, his favorite color. When he saw it, his eyes lit up. But before he could even touch it, Laura's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled softly. It's Rick. He wants to FaceTime. Tyler dropped the handlebars and ran to the phone like a plant bending towards sunlight. Rick's face appeared on the screen, tanned, grinning, holding up a small box. "Happy birthday, champ," he said. Inside was a cheap wristwatch, shiny but fragile, the kind of thing that breaks after a week. Tyler didn't care. He beamed. He told him about the bike, about school, about the new house. Rick nodded, feigned pride, and said, "Your mom's lucky she's got someone helping out." Someone helping out. That phrase stayed with me for years. When the call ended, Tyler went back to the bike. Quieter now. He touched the seat, tested the brakes, but the excitement had dimmed. Later, when I asked if he wanted to take it for a ride, he said maybe tomorrow. He never did. That was when I understood that love, in that house, would always have to compete with fantasy. Still, I stayed. I built routines. Early mornings making breakfast, evenings fixing whatever broke, weekends spent cleaning or driving or paying. It was my way of saying, I'm here. I won't vanish like he did. Sometimes, late at night, Laura would rest her head on my chest and whisper that she wished Rick had been more like me. I'd pretend those words didn't sting. But they did. They were meant as comfort, yet they carried a quiet cruelty. Proof that even in gratitude, she measured me against him. Years passed in that rhythm of half-acceptance. I became the dependable ghost of the household, present, necessary, invisible. The man who carried the groceries, paid the tuition, fixed the leaks. Tyler began to grow into the same tall, lean shape as his father. Same eyes, same careless posture. The resemblance made Laura smile, even when she didn't mean to. There was a photo she kept in her dresser, the three of them at some lake in Nevada years before I arrived. I saw it once while helping her look for receipts. Tyler's arms around Rick's neck, both of them laughing. The image was frozen joy, untouchable. I knew better than to comment, but something in me ached every time I remembered it. When Tyler turned 13, he began testing boundaries. Small things at first, forgotten chores, sarcasm, that teenage tone sharp enough to draw blood if you listen too closely. I told myself it was normal. Boys push against rules to see what holds. But his defiance wasn't aimless. It had direction. Each challenge was aimed squarely at me. One evening, after I asked him to take out the trash, he muttered, "You're not the boss of me." It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Laura heard and sighed. "Tyler, please don't talk like that. No anger, no consequence. Just a mother's tired plea." He smirked and walked away. Later that night, I asked her, "Why don't you ever back me up?" She rubbed her temples. "Because he's just a kid, Mark. He's figuring things out." "So am I," I said. "Except I don't get to act out when I'm tired." She looked at me like I was being unreasonable. That look, half pity, half irritation, became familiar. I began to notice patterns. Whenever Rick called, the atmosphere changed. Laura softened, Tyler brightened, and I became background noise. Sometimes, after the calls, she'd leave the room quiet, reflective, almost mournful. I never asked what they talked about. Some ghosts are better left unprovoked. There was one night, winter, snow thick against the windows, when Tyler fell sick with fever. I stayed up wiping his forehead, changing the towels, calling the doctor. Laura slept through most of it, exhausted. At dawn, when his fever broke, he looked at me through half-open eyes and whispered, "Thanks, Dad." It was the only time he ever said it. And even then, it felt like a mistake he'd regret. For a few months after that, things seemed easier. We laughed more. He started inviting me to his games again. I let myself believe the bridge had finally held. Then, one afternoon, I came home to find Laura sitting at the table, staring at her phone. She looked up and said quietly, "Rick's coming to visit, just for the weekend." Something in my chest shifted. Not jealousy, not fear, but that subtle ache you feel when you realize a test you never agreed to is about to begin. When he arrived, Rick looked like a man rehearsing for redemption. New leather jacket, cologne heavy enough to choke sincerity. He shook my hand firmly, smiled wide, said, "You've been doing great by them. By them. Not us." That weekend, Tyler followed him like a shadow. They went to the park, shared old stories, watched movies late into the night. Laura laughed more in those 2 days than she had in months. I told myself it was fine, that I was the adult, that this reunion was good for Tyler. But watching them together felt like being erased in real time. When Rick left, he promised to visit again soon. He didn't, but the damage had been done. Tyler began comparing everything I did to what Rick used to do. I could hear it in his tone, see it in Laura's hesitation whenever she tried to correct him. Rick never yelled like that. Rick would have let me stay out later. Rick said real fathers don't control their kids. Each sentence was another withdrawal from the small balance of respect I had managed to earn. Still, I stayed. Because that's what men like me do. We mistake endurance for love, responsibility for acceptance. Looking back, I think I stayed because I needed to believe that goodness mattered, that it wasn't just weakness wearing virtue's mask. I needed to believe that the years I gave were building something real, not just delaying collapse. But faith built on denial always cracks. And mine was already splitting, line by line, under the weight of unspoken comparisons. I didn't know it yet, but the day Rick returned to Denver years later, older, poorer, desperate for redemption, would be the day the illusion finally died. That story, though, belongs to the next part. It began with a phone call in late February. One of those gray Denver mornings where the sky looks like wet cement and the city feels half asleep. Laura was sitting at the kitchen counter, still in her robe, coffee going cold. When the phone rang, she hesitated, staring at the screen as if it were something fragile. "It's him," she said. I didn't need to ask who. Rick's name still had a way of shifting the air in a room, the way a gust of cold wind does when you open the door to a house you've tried to keep warm. She answered, and I watched her face change. That subtle tightening around the eyes, the small tremor in her voice, the faint nostalgia she tried to hide. "Tyler's home," she said, smiling faintly. "Yes, he's 18 now." When she hung up, she didn't look at me right away. "He wants to see Tyler," she said. "He says he's in town for work." "Work?" I repeated, tasting the word. "What kind?" She shrugged. "He didn't say, but he sounded different. Calmer. Calmer. That word should have warned me. Men like Rick only calm down when they've run out of places to hide. That evening, when Tyler came home from school, Laura told him. I watched the transformation happen. His tired teenage indifference melted away, replaced by something bright and boyish. Excitement. "Really?" he said. "He's here." "Just for a bit," Laura replied. He grinned. "I want to see him." He didn't ask. He announced. And just like that, the ground beneath me shifted. The next night, Rick arrived. I remember every detail. The crunch of tires on the driveway, the sound of his car door slamming, the faint echo of his voice before I even saw him. He walked in wearing new sneakers, an expensive jacket, and that same effortless grin he'd worn in the old photos Laura never threw away. His hair was thinner now, his eyes more restless, but he carried himself like a man rehearsing confidence. "Mark," he said, offering his hand. "Long time." I shook it. His palm was warm, his grip rehearsed. He smelled of cologne and debt. "Looks like you've been doing a good job," he said, glancing around the house. My house. As if he were inspecting the renovations on something he still owned. Tyler appeared from the hallway, eyes wide, and for a moment, I saw a child again. "Dad," he said. Rick's grin widened. "There's my boy." They hugged, and the sound of it, the soft thud of that embrace, hit me like a hammer. Laura stood watching, hands clasped. She didn't say a word. I excused myself, retreated to the kitchen under the pretense of checking on dinner. From there, I could hear them talking. Rick's easy laughter, Tyler's eager voice, the occasional murmur from Laura. My name wasn't mentioned. I didn't expect it to be. Over the next few weeks, Rick became a constant presence. He'd show up unannounced, always bearing small gifts. A new pair of headphones, a jacket, tickets to a basketball game. The kind of gifts that cost little but looked expensive enough to dazzle. Tyler followed him everywhere. If Rick called, he answered. If Rick suggested something, it became law. One night, while I was paying bills at the dining table, Tyler walked in wearing one of Rick's hoodies. "Dad says he might help me get a car," he said, eyes bright. I looked up. "You already have one." "That's different," he said. "This one would be mine, not yours." He didn't mean it as cruelty, but it landed that way. Laura tried to stay neutral. "It's good they're reconnecting," she told me later. "He's trying, Mark. Maybe this time it's real." I nodded, though inside something hollowed out. Men like Rick didn't try. They performed. And the audience always forgave them. Graduation season approached, and with it came the illusion of unity. Tyler's suit, the celebration, the photographs. All of it carefully staged. Rick promised to help pay for the ceremony. He didn't. I covered the expenses quietly, as always. The rented hall, the catering, the decorations Laura insisted on. On the day of graduation, Rick arrived late but loud, the way men like him always do. Sunglasses, polished shoes, that grin turned up like a switch. He walked straight to Tyler, clapped him on the shoulder, and handed him a small box. Inside was a silver chain. Tyler beamed. "Thanks, Dad." I was standing 3 feet away. He didn't glance at me. When the photographer called for a family picture, Rick positioned himself at the center, arm around Laura, hand on Tyler's back. I stepped to the side, waiting, uncertain whether I was meant to be in it at all. The photographer hesitated, looked at me, then at Laura. She didn't say anything. That silence was my answer, so I stayed out of the frame. Later that night, I found the photo online, posted by one of Tyler's friends. Rick, Laura, and Tyler, 3 perfect smiles. The caption read, "Family." That single word felt like an obituary. After the ceremony, I drove us home. Rick followed behind in his rental car. At the house, everyone spilled inside laughing, the sound of it echoing like someone else's memory. I opened a bottle of wine, poured myself a glass, and sat on the porch alone while the celebration raged inside. From where I sat, I could see Rick holding court in my living room, telling stories about the old days, his voice booming, animated. Laura laughed at every joke. Tyler leaned forward, eyes bright, the way he used to look at me when he wanted approval. That was the moment I understood how illusions die, not with betrayal, but with laughter that no longer includes you. The next morning, the hangover of celebration lingered in the air. Plates stacked, confetti in corners, silence thick with exhaustion. I found Tyler in the kitchen, scrolling through photos on his phone. "Looks like you had a good night," I said. He nodded, distracted. "Yeah, it was great. Dad's the best." I let the word hang there. "Dad." "Glad you think so," I said quietly. He looked up then, perhaps hearing the edge in my voice for the first time. "Don't be like that. You know what I mean." I smiled faintly. "Do I?" He sighed. "You always take things personally." I wanted to tell him that personal was all it had ever been, that everything he stood on, had come from my hands. But I didn't. There was no point shouting into a void that had already decided it was full. That afternoon, Rick stopped by to talk. He said it like an apology but looked too comfortable to mean it. "You've done a lot," he said, leaning against the counter. "Really, but you know how it is, blood's blood. The kid needs his real dad." His real dad. I stared at him. This man who had missed every parent-teacher meeting, every birthday after age 6, every night of fever and fear. And where was his real dad when we were paying for braces? For school? For the roof that leaks every spring? He smiled, unfazed. "Life gets messy. You can't hold that against me forever." "No," I said, "just against myself, for thinking I could fill the hole you left." He shrugged. "You're too serious, man. Tyler's a good kid. Don't make him choose." But he already had. When Rick left, the smell of his cologne lingered, sharp, chemical, the scent of borrowed importance. I opened the windows, but it stayed. Over the next few days, Tyler's gratitude turned into expectation. He wanted new clothes for summer, money for trips, upgrades for the car. "Dad says you're doing well," he'd say, as if quoting scripture. One evening, he mentioned that Rick was thinking of starting a business in town, maybe opening a bar. "He said you could help with the paperwork," Tyler added. That was the final insult. Not the request itself, but the assumption that I'd serve quietly again, financing another man's illusion. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "We'll see." That night, Laura sat beside me on the couch, her voice soft. "He's just happy to have both of you. Don't make it a competition." "It's not a competition," I said. "It's arithmetic. There's only so much room in one life for people who think you're temporary." She looked at me with that same weary pity she'd used years ago. "You're overthinking." Maybe I was. Or maybe I was finally thinking clearly for the first time in years. The next morning, I found the graduation photo printed and framed on the mantel, the one I wasn't in. The frame glittered in the sunlight, perfect symmetry, no room for me. I stood there a long time, staring at it, until something inside me went cold. That was the day the ghost became real again, and I realized I was the one fading. The morning after graduation felt like aftermath. Confetti still clinging to the grass, dishes piled high, laughter dried on the walls. I woke before sunrise and sat in the kitchen with the lights off, the house still heavy with the smell of stale wine and smoke. Outside, the sky over Denver was the color of wet concrete, the kind that never promises clear weather. I listened to the refrigerator hum, to the wind scraping against the windows, to my own breath. It was the kind of silence that only comes when celebration has died and everyone is pretending not to hear the echo. Laura came down in her robe, her voice soft, guilty. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. "Tyler's going to Rick's today," she said carefully. "Just for a bit. They're going to look at apartments near campus." Apartments. A word that meant separation dressed as opportunity. I nodded. "He's 18. He can make his choices." She hesitated. "You're not angry?" I smiled, not kindly but tiredly. "I've run out of anger. There's just math left." She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't want to. When the door closed behind them later that morning, I sat down with my laptop and opened every account that had my name on it. Tuition, insurance, cell phone, car, credit lines, savings, all of it. 8 years of support laid out in numbers. The cost of devotion in neat digital columns. The cursor blinked like a pulse. For years, I told myself that money wasn't love, that what mattered was the presence, the small acts, the quiet steadiness. But in a house where loyalty was measured by who paid the bills, money was the only language anyone really understood. So that morning, I decided to speak it fluently one last time. I began closing things. First, the insurance. Then the car payments. Then the automatic tuition draft. The college fund I had built in Tyler's name. Gone in a few clicks, transferred back to my own account. Every number I erased felt like a truth being restored. It wasn't anger guiding my hands. It was clarity. There comes a moment when a man realizes that his generosity has become the rope that keeps him tied to people who resent him. Cutting that rope doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. By the time Laura and Tyler came back that evening, the house felt lighter, emptier. She was talking before she'd even set down her bag. "It went great," she said. "Rick's going to help him move in next month. He says he's got some business lined up. He's really turning things around." I nodded, letting her talk, letting the lie breathe. Tyler wandered in behind her, holding a bag of takeout and smiling like a boy who finally believed his father had come back from war. "We're getting a place together," he said. "It'll be good for us." He said he wants to make up for lost time. "Good," I said. "Then he can start now." Neither of them noticed the tone. They were too full of momentum, too buoyed by the fantasy. That night, while they slept, I printed out a folder. Every receipt, every tuition statement, every car repair, every medical bill I had ever paid. I laid them neatly on the kitchen table, stacked in chronological order, each line proof that I had existed in their lives beyond sentiment. At dawn, I woke Tyler. "Get dressed," I said. He blinked, confused. "What's going on?" "Trip," I said. "Just you and me." Laura stirred, half awake, but I told her to go back to sleep. She didn't argue. Maybe she thought I was trying to reconcile. Maybe she didn't care. We drove in silence. The highway stretched wide and empty, the city shrinking in the rear view. Tyler scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the tension riding sh*TG*N. After an hour, I pulled into a small street lined with aging houses, paint peeling, fences sagging. "Where are we?" he asked. "Your father's place." He frowned. "Why?" I handed him the folder. "Everything inside belongs to you now." He opened it, flipping through pages. "What is this?" 8 years, I said. Every dollar, every effort, every lie I told myself that this family was mine. You said I wasn't your father. I'm just agreeing with you. His mouth opened, but no words came. "Go on," I said. Show him what being a father costs." He looked out the window at the rundown duplex, the overgrown yard, the sagging porch. "You can't just drop me here." "I'm not dropping you," I said quietly. "I'm delivering you to the man whose name you worship." He clenched his jaw. "You're out of your mind." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm finally honest." Rick answered the door in a stained t-shirt, eyes *T, surprised. "Mark," he said, half smiling. "What brings you?" I held up the folder. "Everything you owe." He laughed nervously. "Come on, man. No need for drama." "It's not drama. It's inheritance." I turned to Tyler. "This is the man you wanted. Take your life back. Every debt, every responsibility, every promise he never kept. It's all yours now." Rick's smile faltered. "You can't just." "I already did," I said. Tyler looked between us, face pale. "Dad, say something." Rick stammered, searching for words, for authority he'd never earned. "Look, I didn't ask for this." "No," I said. "You never ask. You just arrive and leave. But now you get to stay. Congratulations." I walked back to the car before either of them could speak. Tyler followed, shouting, but I didn't turn around. His voice cracked somewhere between anger and fear, a sound I'd heard before when he was a boy afraid of thunder. I kept walking. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the driveway, folder clutched to his chest, Rick behind him looking lost. For the first time, I saw them for what they were. Not father and son, not heroes and victims, just two men who had mistaken absence for love. I drove home slowly, the kind of slow that feels deliberate, like you're savoring the ending. When I walked through the door, Laura was waiting. Her eyes were red. "Where is he?" "With his father," I said. She stepped forward. "What did you do?" "I gave him what he wanted." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're cruel." "No," I said. "I'm finished." She shook her head. "You can't just cut him off like that." "I didn't cut him off," I said. "I let him go." "There's a difference." She collapsed into a chair, whispering, "He's just a boy." I sat across from her. "Then maybe his father can teach him how to be a man." That night, the house felt like a hollow shell. Every sound echoed. Every corner reminded me of the years I'd filled it with effort that no one remembered. I poured a drink and watched the moonlight stretch across the floor like a pale confession. For the first time in 8 years, the weight in my chest lifted. Freedom doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like standing in the ruins of a house you built and realizing it's finally quiet. A week passed before Laura called. Her voice was trembling. "He's gone," she said. "Rick." "Yes, again." "He took the money Tyler gave him for rent and disappeared." I closed my eyes. "I'm not surprised." "Tyler's back," she said. "He's been sleeping at a friend's house. He wants to talk." I said nothing. "Please," she whispered. "He's sorry." "Is he?" "Yes. He knows he was wrong." "No," I said quietly. "He knows he's broke." Silence stretched between us, heavy and final. Later that evening, I heard the knock. I didn't open the door right away. When I did, Tyler stood there, thinner, pale, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at me with the same eyes that once held defiance, now dulled by fear. "Can I come in?" he asked. "No," I said. He swallowed hard. "I messed up. I know. Please, I just need a place to stay." "You have one," I said. "Go to your mother." She said. He stopped himself. "She said you wouldn't forgive me." "I don't need to forgive you," I said. "I just need to stop pretending you're someone you're not." He tried to speak again, but I closed the door gently before he could. I stood there on the other side, listening to the silence that followed. No banging, no pleading, just retreating footsteps fading down the hall. The next morning, I removed his name from the last remaining account, the utilities, the insurance, the phone. Clean. Final. When Laura called again, I didn't answer. There was nothing left to discuss. That evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The same place where the story began, where homework and laughter once filled the hours. The air smelled of rain. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to prove that love was an equation, that enough effort could balance what blood had broken. Now I knew better. Love without respect is servitude. And servitude wears the mask of virtue until you finally tear it off and see the scars underneath. I raised my glass to the empty chair across from me and whispered, "Was I wrong?" The house didn't answer. It never did.